As a reminder, this meeting is governed by Florida sunshine laws, is open to the public and media, and is being shared live at UCF's Presidential Search website. And as we begin, let me note, while this is the third meeting of the Presidential Search Committee, it's the first meeting since our football Knights finished an undefeated, perfect 13-0 national championship season. As proud as we are of our thrilling season, great victory in the Peach Bowl over Auburn, let me remind everyone we're also celebrating an academic championship. Our football team had the best graduation rate among the 12 teams competing in the New Year's Day bowl games. Overall, our student athletes in all sports have posted the highest graduation rate among public universities in the entire country for now 4 consecutive years. It's a truly fantastic accomplishment. So, with that great news and kickoff into this new year, Laura Siliano, if you will please call the roll to ensure a quorum.
Thank you. Search Chairman David Walsh.
Here.
Search Vice Chair Beverly C. Miss Christina Barreto.
Here.
Miss Sarah Bernard.
Present.
Dr. Gordon Chavez.
Present.
Dr. Manoj Chopra.
Here.
Mayor Buddy Dyer.
Here.
The Honorable Sidney Kitson.
Here.
Mr. Michael Manglardi.
Here.
Mr. Ken Robinson.
Here.
The Honorable Conrad Santiago. The Honorable Rick Walsh.
Here.
Dr. Linda Walters.
Here.
Dr. Felicia Williams. Trustee William Yergin.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Laura. Let me note that I believe Trustee Marchena, Trustee Chairman Marchena, is on the line. I believe.
I am. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning,
Any
everyone.
questions he can answer relating to the upcoming discussion on presidential compensation analysis. Okay, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our December 4, 2017 meeting. The minutes were sent along to everybody last week and should be in your packet this morning. So I'd like to entertain any discussion about the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
If there is no further discussion on the minutes, we should take a vote to approve. All like sign with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, the motion passes and the minutes of the December 4th meeting are approved. Vice President and General Counsel Scott Cole is out, so I'll ask Vice President Heston to update the committee on the status of the presidential compensation analysis. I think there's a package of that in your package, and Grant, if you'll discuss that.
All right. I don't have a legal degree, but I'll try to bring as much gravitas as I can to this discussion. But as part of the search process, the Florida Board of Governors requires a search committee to conduct an analysis of the executive compensation to guide the Board of Trustees when negotiating a contract with the new president. At the committee's first meeting, as you recall, on November 20th, you discussed having UCF Human Resources conduct an analysis or hiring an independent third-party firm to do it. The committee unanimously voted to use an outside firm chosen at the discretion of the university to conduct a study. UCF considered proposals from Mercer and Simpson Consulting, both of whom are leading experts in the field. We selected Simpson, and the firm conducted the study of a compensation comparison of, the firm conducted a study of the compensation of comparison, aspirational, and state university system presidents. You received that study earlier this week electronically. You also have it in your packet this morning. The report will provide the data foundation for the Board of Trustees to use when negotiating a contract with a new president. And just for definitional note, the institutions identified as comparison and aspirational universities come from UCF's strategic plan. The comparison institutions are similar to UCF in enrollment, research output, size, and other ways. We compare ourselves to them as we are now. Aspirational institutions are universities we look to emulate and become similar to in the future. And we typically use those as data points, but not part of a negotiation with a candidate. On the line, we have Yelena Stiles, a senior consultant with Simpson, to provide an overview and answer your questions. Yelena's experience includes conducting compensation assessments for faculty, administration, and staff at colleges and universities around the country. She is an expert. And before we hear from Yelena, I want to make sure that the committee knows that Maureen Bender, the Associate Vice President for Human Resources and our Chief Human Resources Officer, did an outstanding job of managing this process from start to finish, making sure that it was ready, comprehensive, and thorough for today's meeting. So Maureen, thank you, and your team for everything that you did. Following Yelena's presentation, as Chairman Walsh said, the committee will need to vote on approving this package to send it to the Board of Trustees next week. So Yelena, I believe you're on the line, and the floor is yours.
I am. Thank you very much, everyone. Since I only have a few minutes, I'm going to focus on a few key aspects of this report. When reviewing compensation at the executive and the presidential level, we do want to conduct a review of total remuneration, which you see here. So it includes quite a few different components, including base salary, bonus and incentive compensation, which form the total cash basis, and then there's other taxable perquisites and benefits, retirement and deferred compensation, as well as non-taxable benefits. We find that most of our clients do tend to focus on the base salary and the bonus and incentive compensation components first. They tend to form the primary components of the compensation package, and then the retirement and deferred compensation components. What I would like to note as background is that this data for the comparison and the aspirational peers comes from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And while it is an excellent source, especially when it comes to the doctoral large institutions within which UCF, what I would say is that on the other compensation and the non-taxable benefits side, this is an area where we know that the reporting may not be as clear, for example, as it might be on the private institution side, who are required to report this type of compensation on an annual basis in their Form 990s. So I would just take that information with a grain of salt. We provide a wide range of compensation from the 25th percentile, the median, the 75th, and the 90th. So you could take a look at this range, and then based on the candidates with whom you will be negotiating, you can determine an appropriate range based on the individual's prior experience and qualifications, the charge that they will be given when they come to the institution, whether it's stay the course or right the ship or significantly change the strategy. We find that most of our clients, when it comes to negotiations for a new president, tend to focus mostly on the middle range of pay, between that 25th percentile and the 75th percentile, which interestingly enough has been narrowing over the last 5 to 10 years. So whereas before we used to see a range on the base salary and the bonus of anywhere at the executive level, 75 to 100% in terms of the difference, now we're seeing it significantly narrower. For example, on the comparison peers, you're seeing the base salary range, that middle ground, just 25% difference between the 25th and the 75th percentile on the comparison peers. You have an interesting system approach. When it comes to bonus and incentive compensation, especially in the publics, that prevalence has been growing. You see on the comparison peers, almost half offer a bonus, and this is actual payouts. So if there might have been an opportunity for the president, but they did not receive anything, it would have been reported as zeros. This is actual. And even in the aspirational peers, about 40%. The state university system, we find, has an interesting approach to compensation because you have performance-based funding and a very clear approach to performance-based compensation. And for the individual presidents, the PUP, the Performance Unit Plan, we find that the state university system has higher prevalence of bonus pay, but also generally a higher mix of bonus versus base than other public institutions, which is starting to become a little bit of a trend. We do find institutions more likely than not to start to offer bonus and performance-based compensation for their presidents, and more so developing a plan like you have today. So something that is very structured with clear goals and objectives and metrics, rather than the bonus plans of old, which tended to be a little bit more discretionary. So putting more complexity and more frameworks around the bonus plan. Are there any questions that I can address? Because I do want to make sure that you have a good understanding of the information in the report, and that can help guide any further comments for me.
I'd like to, and I'm flipping through this, but I'm trying to see if there was any indication of where we determined who was our comparison institutions and how we determined aspirational and comparison institution or peer. Was that from our strategic plan or? Okay.
It is. It is from the strategic plan. The list of institutions is on page 30 if you wanted to take a look at the specific names of the institutions. So as mentioned earlier, that comparison peer group are institutions that are similar to UCF. So in type, right, doctoral, very high research, size, whether it's financial, student enrollment. You can use other metrics such as academic measures when it comes to graduation rates, retention rates, and so on. The aspirational peer group are institutions that you would want to be like in the future, so not quite like you today, but in the future. And usually when it comes to the presidential negotiations, the institution does look at the comparison peer group rather than the aspirational peer group. And then the state university system of Florida, because it's such a tight system, we find that in our work with the other SUS schools for which we've done this type of assessment, that it is important to maintain competitiveness with the SUS schools as well, in addition to the comparison peer groups. So that's why we reported this information as well on page 13, the report.
If we look at page 9, the outlier, if we take that one out, do you think it's about the same for the two groups?
If we take the very high payout in there, would the medians, would the compensation levels be more similar?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know what? It may be. It would have more of an impact, I think, in these groups because the aspirin group is fairly small. It has about 8 institutions. So if we took the outlier out, so let me just do that really quickly for you. I can actually do that live. All right, so if I take the outlier out, it brings, let's say, all right, so the median on the base salary, okay, so the median doesn't actually change on the base salary. The median stays the same only because you have that as the outlier. It's your top one, and it's such a small group. It would definitely start to change your 90th percentile at the top end of the range, but the median is not affected when it comes to the base and the total compensation. Your 90th percentile on base, let's see, so that it also stays the same.
I guess it's a small sample, so it's just one person, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just one person. It's going to be a unique situation. It would definitely change the slope of the line that you see on page 9. All right, it'll change the R squared. The slope would be slightly less angled. Page 9 is interesting. So we do this analysis to try to see. Oh, go ahead. To see whether there's a relationship between the size of the institution when it comes to expenses and the total remuneration. When we do this work for corporations, we usually find a very strong link and relationship between the size of their pay package when it comes to total remuneration and their revenue size. When it comes to higher education and other nonprofits, some institutions, some groups show a stronger relationship and some don't. And interestingly enough, you could see that here on page 9 when you're looking at the comparison peers. Not really a strong relationship, but the aspirational peers more so. But it's very inconsistent when it comes to higher education, unlike when we see it in corporations. Any other questions or any page that you'd like me to talk about in more detail?
If there's nothing else, I'd just like to maybe reinforce what the work product we requested is meant to be is a market survey, market assessment. It's not necessarily a firm set of guidelines. It's a update. The board has routinely in the compensation committee, the board of trustees, an ongoing market survey of where the presidency should be in terms of compensation, in terms of a survey. So our request as a committee was to have that updated externally, the survey. It would go next to the, I believe our Board of Trustees Compensation Committee and then the board for updating formally of the study that's on file presently. But to remember, it's a market survey, not a set of firm guidelines. So.
Exactly. And that's a great point.
A quick question for clarification. Between
Yes,
the perquisites that are listed on page 5 and the categories that are labeled as other compensation and non-taxable benefits, could you tell us how those are distributed?
Oh, absolutely. So what we find is that in a lot of cases, the housing and auto allowance or provisions tend to be on the non-taxable benefits side, especially the housing. Typically, when the housing is a requirement of presidential employment, it could be treated as non-taxable. The other compensation tends to be smaller in many cases and might include just other travel expenses, spending accounts, sometimes tax gross-ups, for example. And then on the non-taxable benefits, it will include a lot of the housing, the auto, and then a big portion of it will also be the health and welfare benefits.
And should we preclude that an institution that is assuming that responsibility for an incumbent, that is not reflected there because it's in the institution's expenses rather than the individual? Are you accounting for that if the institution is paying versus it being an allowance?
Mm-hmm. So if the institution is if the institution is providing that housing, we would say that is typically not reported in here in the chronicle information. On the private side, when we look at the private institutions, when it comes to reporting to the IRS on the Form 990, even if the housing is provided by the institution and it is treated as non-taxable, the IRS requires reporting of an annual fair market rental value.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask one more question. How does the current salary of the incumbent go into this? We haven't included our own data point in this, so do we not consider that? It'll be later. Okay, Grant is saying it's later, right? It's in there? Okay.
Yeah, it is. We did include it as part of the SUS report out, so you could see it on page 13, right in the middle there. But in terms of the purpose of the report being used to inform the negotiations for the incoming president, we didn't want to muddy the water because you're not necessarily going to be paying a new incumbent the same as President Hitt, who has, over 25 years of successful presidential leadership for UCF, has played a significant role in the transformation of the university, in Central Florida and the region. So that's why we didn't include it as part of, for example, the summary on page 8 and 10 and 11. But it was requested that we had included him as part of the SUS listing on page 13.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. So this goes to the Board of Trustees, and then do they come back to us? And do we have an opportunity? Because, obviously this is a lot of information in here that we just received, and having not had a chance to review it, is there then an opportunity for us to comment on that? Or how does, from a procedural perspective, how does that work?
Well, within the Board of Trustees, the formal process for the ongoing continuous existence of a market survey for the president's role is out there already. There is one that exists now that was updated, I think, Maureen, about a year ago, was internally done. So we had charged the firm with updating that for our benefit. Then this would go, hopefully our idea was today's comments would embody any comments that we have, but the compensation committee of the Board of Trustees would hopefully endorse this as an updated ongoing survey for the role.
Right.
And the Board of Trustees would vote on it in the upcoming meeting in 10 days.
So our committee really doesn't have any feedback other than today on the...
That's what's been contemplated, right. Yep.
It would be nice to be able to have some comment on that at some point. I mean, the Board of Trustees is going to do a great job. We understand that. But it'd be nice if we did have some input.
Especially if there were changes. I mean, if significant changes were made to the update somehow when you got through the board committee, I think this committee should have the opportunity to review that before it goes to the full board for vote, I guess. Otherwise...
You're suggesting if changes occur to the study that the board finally votes on?
Any significant changes of any kind, I think, is what Sid is talking about here, and I agree.
From this?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And I think, even one of the comments I think I heard was that a lot of the schools, our system uses metrics and we have performance standards, and it's been successful. And other schools are actually going towards that, and it'd be nice for us to be able to at least see how that's going to work. I think that's an important component of the compensation.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, just for a point of clarification, is the negotiating of the compensation package of the candidate ultimately the responsibility of the Board of Trustees and the Compensation Committee? So we're not, at this point, this is just a market study data point. Is that correct?
That was the point that I raised was this is a market survey. This is not a guideline that this committee is imposing on the recruitment firm nor the process of here's a upper and lower limit of what must be done. The negotiation of the package with the potential candidate would be done by the Board of Trustees. And Chairman Marchena, I believe you're on the line. Maybe perhaps you could add to that, or that's really...
No, I think that's accurate. This is supposed to show the parameters for the compensation, and your indication to the Board of Trustees that we think this market research shows an appropriate set of parameters. The Compensation Committee will then look at it in a little bit more detail and say to the Board of Trustees, this shows that our survey has been generally consistent, and they will authorize the chair to negotiate based upon negotiate the compensation with the ultimately selected candidate based upon this information that has been updated.
Perhaps as a guide, Mr. Chairman? This
Absolutely.
information, yeah, as a guide.
Within these parameters, I certainly would expect that the guidance would be to stay within these parameters. You know, it may be based upon the candidate that is selected that we choose to be in the mid-range, or we may want to be in the 75th percentile range,
Right.
Or somewhere in between.
So we're simply acting at this stage to endorse that the study it's met our needs, it's met the scope requirement of the charge we provided the consultant for a study. It appears to be thorough and potentially useful, but it's not a firm, specific set of guidelines that will constitute then an offer. It doesn't mean that.
I think I heard Governor Kitson perhaps expressing a little bit of concern that the committee has only had a few days to look at the report. If the committee wanted to have a little bit, some additional time for review and have a follow-up conference call to make sure that you're comfortable with the outcome of the report, that's certainly reasonable, and you could certainly do that within the next 10 days prior to it coming to the Board of Trustees.
That might be helpful, but I also think it'd be helpful to understand what the strategy is, or what those parameters are going to look like after the Board of Trustees meeting. That could be even more meaningful for us to understand that. It sounds like once we have a candidate, then the Board of Trustees is going to negotiate the compensation, whatever that remuneration ultimately becomes. And I'm just trying to understand then. So it sounds like this committee doesn't have any ability to comment on that, or what the structure of that is, or what the ultimate compensation would be.
I think that's correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Your task is to make sure that we have updated data and an appropriate range.
And that's my understanding, Mr. Chairman. According to our charge, we are charged with updating the data.
Okay.
That's what we commissioned, whether it be in-house or hiring a firm.
Right.
We commissioned hiring a firm. This is the data, and I'm not sure we have to vote on anything. This is simply the data for our review. We can make comment on it as the process unfolds, but ultimately the negotiations is outside the duties or responsibilities of this committee.
Understood.
The
data is the data. I get.
Right.
That's not. We don't have to discuss that. I think this comes down to really more ultimately what the Board of Trustees does with that data. So you're right. There's no need for us to really do anything between now and that particular time.
That's right.
Just understanding that process and procedure is helpful.
Yeah. But the vote is simply limited to has our charge been met of adequately updating the compensation survey we have on file already. There is one already.
Right.
So there's a choice to use a year-old one that was internally done, or we had concluded by vote in the last meeting to have it updated externally, which we've done, and the vote would simply be, is that objective been met?
David, Grant, were there any significant differences between the existing data that we had and the new data that we're now proposing? And if so, anything unusual or we should be aware of?
No, I think it's very consistent with what we've seen in the past.
Okay, so nothing notable in there that's, okay.
Mr. Chairman, for clarification, since we made the decision to commission this particular study, is that by default also an indication that it is this study that will be utilized by the Board of Trustees, or do they have the option to defer instead to the internal study that had previously been completed?
Well, the board, I think, reserves the right to decline the results of the study, to modify it, or to continue to use the one that's on file. But I mean, I would suspect that the good, thorough work updating it would be used.
And since there does not appear to be a,
But I can't speak ahead for how
Market
the
split.
trustees would vote.
it was just more of a clarification of process. Is it permissible versus their practice? It's just a knowledge question. Yeah.
I think according to the regulations that we are governed by, we are fulfilling our obligation of obtaining the executive compensation analysis, which this study covers. And that's then to be used by other powers that be, not this committee, in negotiating the ultimate compensation package. So I think we have satisfied our responsibility in commissioning this data. I guess the question, that Mr. Chairman, you're asking is this sufficient to us as a committee? Is that what
Yeah,
voting on?
that's
That's not what she was asking. Felicia was asking, is the Board of Trustees compelled to use this data, or can they go somewhere else? Again, I would consider that highly unusual if they did,
Well, it
and
appears
certainly would have a lot of questions at that point. Yeah.
It appears they're required to use the updated information according to the regulations that we were provided that govern this committee and that govern the selection of the next president of the university.
I can
Right,
help
yeah.
answer that question, that if this committee approves the study, it would go to the Compensation and Labor Committee. They could approve it, they could not approve it. Assuming they do approve it, it would go to the Board of Trustees to be voted on. Assuming they approve it, that is what would guide the negotiations for a new president.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we accept this study and forward it to the next
To the
step.
next level.
Second.
any further discussion with the
I
motion made?
no further discussion other than, can the committee be provided electronic copy of this?
Yes. Yes. Okay, with that, I'll call for a vote to approve that the work product has been accomplished of providing an updated external study of compensation for the presidency. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Okay, with that, the motion has been passed, and the study, as it is, has been approved, and will be passed along to the Compensation Committee of the Board of Trustees for evaluation in the upcoming next week's meeting. Okay, with that, as Board of Trustees Chairman Marchena said at our first meeting, the search process will be inclusive, transparent, and comprehensive. And I've asked Grant Heston to update us on the efforts being undertaken to ensure the search is all of those things, and how we're showcasing this as an opportunity to showcase and demonstrate the power and reach of UCF. Grant?
Thank you, Chairman Walsh. As I stand here, I very much realize I am the opening act standing between you and Parker. And the job of any opening act is to hurry up and get off the stage for the main show. So I'm going to go very quickly here. Since you last saw, this is a screenshot of the Presidential Search website. This is a site that is constantly evolving, growing, adding new things to it. I would encourage you, if you have a few minutes in between this meeting and the listening session or later today, on your mobile, go to ucf.edu, and then you can click on Presidential Search, and this will show you how we've designed this as a very mobile-friendly site that has meeting resources, that has minutes, that has videos, that has our new search brochure. It is really the one-stop shop for not just people in the UCF community who are interested in this search, but in the external community for people who are interested in the search. So in the interest of time, I'll just encourage you to do that at some point later today. This is the online survey that has been part of our listening session. We've sent this out multiple times to students, faculty, staff, alumni. Maritza Martinez has done a great job of sending it to community leaders. We stand today at about 1,300 responses to these 3 questions. After the weekend, we're going to take these, put them together, and post those on the Presidential Search website and share that with this committee so that you can take a look at all of these responses, in addition to the feedback we receive at the listening sessions today. We'll walk you through the search brochure that we provided provided Lori. We wanted to use the brochure. This is just a screenshot of one of the pages of tell people, potential candidates, who UCF is, our data, our student body, all of those things, but also the kind of institution that we are, that we believe in inclusivity, that we think big, we dream big. I sent this to you electronically, so if you haven't had a chance to look through it, I encourage you to do that. It highlights all of the best pieces of this university, and Patrick Burt and his team deserve a lot of credit for turning this around into what I hope is a very useful tool for Lori and Portia. Florida Trend, we've put one of our brand building presidential search ads in this month's issue of Florida Trend, which also coincides with a nice article on the succession, the committee, the process. And again, this committee should be proud that there's multiple presidential searches going on in the state. One of them is having a little bit of a rough time, and at their most recent committee, one of their search committee members made the comment that why can't we have a transparent, open process like what's going on in Orlando with UCF? So I think our commitment to transparency and inclusivity is being seen and understood. This is the job posting that we've run in the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, diverse issues, Hispanic Outlook, anywhere that somebody could find a job posting, we're putting it here. This is really interesting. We talked about trying to think differently. The Chronicle of Higher Education has a crossword puzzle in every issue. We approached them and said, hey, can we buy your crossword puzzle and make it an ad about the presidential search site? And they said, well, no one's ever asked us that. So they said yes. And so we have a crossword puzzle about the presidential search that references the job ad and all the other things that we're doing. And just as a side note, I just assumed that there was an app that you could program a crossword puzzle for. As it turns out, one of our staff went home and built this crossword herself by hand at the kitchen table. So that's also in your packet, so if you have some time, feel free. There's one that I know for sure I can answer. I can't remember what it is. I think it's 17 across. It's UCF's current president. I got that one right, H-I-T-T. I know I got that one right. Last thing I want to share before we turn it over to Parker is national championship couldn't come at a better time for bringing a spotlight to this presidential search and what we're trying to do here at this university. So a Peach Bowl victory, undefeated season, national championship being talked about across the country for the last week and a half could not come at a better time, as far as I'm concerned, for putting UCF in the spotlight and bringing attention to everything that we do, not just football, but the academics. A story in the Washington Post 2 days ago about the combination of academics and athletics at this university was really remarkable. So don't think that the football championship just ends with a championship. It really is going to bring a spotlight on this, what we're doing here. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or get off the stage and turn it over to the rock stars.
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
First, I want to congratulate you on all the work that you're doing, which is absolutely outstanding. The question goes back to the 1,300 responses to the survey. What, or do we know the categories of, the buckets of the respondents, who's responding most, and is that going to be reported as well in like a pie chart or something to that effect?
We haven't broken that down yet, but we will. When we send it to you, we'll say of the 1,400, here's where they came from: alumni, students, faculty, staff.
Anything else? Okay, Lori, we deeply appreciate you making the journey from Atlanta this morning to be with us and give us an update on the very, very major heavy lifting being done by Parker to support our candidate identification efforts nationally and globally. So, Lori, with that, and you have pre-signed the governor's decree on the declaration that we are number one.
No question.
As a condition of speaking, so.
No question about it. We're on board. We'll get our T-shirts later this afternoon.
Thank
for
you.
Sure.
Please go.
I mean that. We will. We'll wear that with pride in Atlanta. We'll appreciate very much the opportunity to be here. I know this is an exciting part of this, and the work that's been done has been tremendous. I think rock star is a little bit of an exaggeration by Grant, but we'll appreciate it. What we want to do very quickly, because really the meat of today is going to be listening to the various constituency groups talk talk about this tremendous opportunity. And I think it will do you all a great service as you all go look and identify these candidates. But it will also help us greatly as we're talking to candidates to talk about what we heard while here on campus. So I think that's important. But let me just give you a little bit of an overview of what's been done. So obviously the advertising component, the very kind of reactive approach to this part has been tremendous. It's probably been better than we've seen at any institution. So we're excited about that. And then what we've been doing has been a very proactive approach to identifying potential candidates for this opportunity. And so we have reached out and put together really a comprehensive thought process in our organization for strategy. And we've done that very similar to how you did your compensation study, looking at benchmark institutions, looking at aspirational institutions, and looking for those individuals within those organizations that may be in a position to consider that position. And again, that could be anyone from a sitting president to a provost, a vice president of academic affairs, deans of large organizations, and other senior leadership within organizations. We've also been contacting thought leaders across the country to really say, okay, here's the opportunity, here's what they're looking for, here is the position in itself, who is out there that may be potential for this opportunity. Obviously, we spend a lot of time on a day-to-day basis really trying to understand what the market looks like, and so we're reaching out to those individuals, but we also want to make sure we don't miss a hidden gem. So somebody who maybe isn't on the radar today, but is on someone's radar. So we're really being proactive, and that's the important part of this. The next 30 so days is a critically important piece. You have all your documentation, you'll have your listening sessions complete, then you really can drive that market. So those numbers will continue to grow. Again, those aren't individuals who have said, I'm interested in this job today, but it's people that we're talking to really gain an interest and to see what the market is saying about the university. And that's an important piece. And so what I'd like to do is just very briefly tell you so far, this is an early read of what people are saying. And I will tell you it is absolutely impressive. As we've been talking to those individuals about this position, they know UCF. You're right, the last press in the last couple of weeks has not heard it all. They know UCF, but I think they knew UCF before the football championship. I think they knew it from what you were doing and the trajectory in which you've been on, both academically, from a student success, also from a research perspective. So your name recognition is outstanding on a national basis as we go out and try to identify talent. There's a real thought that your trajectory has a long way to go as well, and that this is not an institution that's done. And I think that's a critically important piece, that you really have been moving the needle, but there's still runway left. And so as we've talked to these individuals, that is a very, very exciting to them. And so our early reads are, that's great. Our biggest concern right now from candidates is clearly the open process that's required in the state of Florida. That is giving some individuals great pause as we talk to sitting presidents. That is obviously a massive concern for them. And so we're working through that, and we're talking about how we go about creating a very transparent process, but also ensuring that we have the best pool of candidates. And so right now, from a search update perspective, again, very early, we lost a little time just because of the holiday season, and just people don't return your phone calls as quickly as you might want them to. But right now, we're hearing enough positives and enough people who want to talk more. And that's the best part. They want to talk more. They're not saying no to this opportunity, that we feel very good about where we are. We feel very strongly about that we're targeting the right individuals. We're going to ask the listening sessions, and we encourage your chairman to ask the listening sessions today for nominations and recommendations. Those are beginning to come in. So we are seeing members of the community as well as faculty members and staff here on campus submitting recommendations to us. And I think that's very, very important. And we're following up on all of those nominations and recommendations to determine interest. If someone says no, then we very quickly turn them into a source of other potential candidates that we might reach out to from that perspective. So the search is progressing, and that's the good news. The difficult part in this, as you all know, is to get individuals to commit when their information will become a public record. And as I've said as we go along, majority of the candidates will submit towards the end of this process. They will wait and towards the end of the process to really give us a feel for, from protecting their confidentiality as long as possible. So this is a very, very large individual group of people that we're reaching out to, because we think that's what ensures a really transparent search. And you as a committee members have done everything right from that perspective. And so what we want to do is to continue to that. So what I'll do, one of the things I do think is important, but we're just running out of time today, and I don't want to take away from the listening sessions that we're going to have in a few minutes, is I want to talk to you as committee members, and I think as a follow-up to Grant's comment, once you get that data, once you see the data from this and from the listening sessions, I want to have a conversation with you as committee members to talk about what you're looking for as well, to really have that conversation where you as committee members have taken the information from listening sessions and really said, okay, here's what we would like to really find in individuals. Your job description is great. The characteristics that the board has put together really gives us a framework so we can get out into the market, and that's what we're doing. But I also think it's important for you all to hear what everyone else in this room is thinking from that perspective, and it will help you as we go along and you make those decisions as to who you would like to interview as well. And I was hoping we'd have a little time to do some of that today, but I think we got a little bit of time. We got about 15 minutes, so that's great. Before we do that, let me ask the question, is there any questions you have us about process, what we're doing, things you'd like us to do?
You had mentioned that candidates would submit their names near the end of the process. What is the deadline? I just don't recall. What's the deadline that we've given them to do
Sure.
that?
What we're doing, and I think that within about 30 days, we're going to be able to see what the market is looking like. And what I've said and what we've talked to Grant about and the chairman about is before we put a absolute definitive date, let's get out into the market. Let's see what the market is saying to us. Let's see what that candidate, we anticipate within about 30 days, we'll know what that looks like. And then we'll be in a position to talk about timing and to absolutely get to what that timing is going to be.
Are you having internal candidates submit also?
I anticipate we will have internal candidates. We often do. We rarely do not have internal candidates from that perspective, but we'll reach out to all candidates. And my understanding and what we've been told as we've been hired to do this is a truly open national search, and in our mind that means internal as well as external candidates.
Lori, I know you can't comment on specifics at this early stage, but can you comment on the quality of the applicants that you're getting? Are we getting substantial number of quality?
Well, there's a difference between applications and individuals who are interested in talking, right? So right now, from an application standpoint, those numbers are very small. That typically is a response to advertisement from an application standpoint. It's really about who are we talking to, right? And I can tell you who we're speaking with that are showing levels of interest, meaning I want to learn more, I want to talk more, I want to do some due diligence, I want to read more, and let's get together and have conversations. That quality is very strong.
Lori, and how deep that pool looks early on? I know it's very premature, but how deep is that pool, volume-wise?
You know, I think that at the end of the day, it will not be, from a quantity perspective, a massive level of candidates, as well as from a quality standpoint. I've said all along that the pool itself will be relatively shallow, and that is a framework of open records. So individuals who may submit their materials thinking maybe I'll get a chance in this, often will not do that because they don't want to be a part of a process unless they really feel like they are the candidate that's going to be there. And so from a depth perspective of the candidates that we're talking right now, I like it. I like where we are. I feel very positive about where we are right now at this stage in that. Now, again, within next week, 2 weeks, 30 days, I'm going to know exactly where we are. But the quality of the candidates, the number of quality candidates that are indicating and reaching out when we're very quickly reaching back to us when we make that first initial phone call is very strong.
Any other common concerns you're seeing other than that open process issue?
Really, that's the only thing at this point. I anticipate we'll get some other comments from individuals as we go into those deep dive conversations. But right now, that's really the only issue that's been brought up is how do I go about this? What's the process going to look like at the end of the day? And how long is my public exposure going to be? And that's not uncommon. We expected all of that.
I know Chairman Marchena had initially suggested that our timeline loosely be recommendations to the Board of Trustees by March. Are we still looking? I know you haven't pinpointed deadlines yet, but are we still on our timeline?
I think that's absolutely fair.
Lori, we're feeling pretty good about our commitment to diversity through the process, and the candidate pool appears to be very broad and deep in that respect as well.
Absolutely. And what's important there is that initial 400, 500 people that you reach out to, it has to be diverse. It has to be as it relates to gender and underrepresented groups, and it is. And that's something that Portia and I, quite frankly, we sit down every day, every morning, and we talk about this search. And we talk about who are we missing, who do we need to call, who's another person that might be able to give us a great lead of that next phenomenal leader that's out there. And we also talk about how do we ensure that this committee sees a diverse pool of candidates.
Right.
The daily conversation.
Lori, how about non-traditional candidates that may not come from the academia environment? Are you trying to reach out to those as well, and how is that going?
We do, and one of the things about non-traditional candidates, those that come from outside of the academy, what our experience shows is they tend to have a connection to the university, they tend to have a connection to the region or the state, right? So it's not necessarily someone that's never been here, doesn't wake up and say, I'd like to go be the president there. So they typically will get nominated through the process, and they'll come up organically from that perspective. We do talk to a lot of people across the country as well as locally to say, who do you think we should call? And that's where those names will come from. So we will pursue those. We will aggressively, our job is to make sure that you have a diverse pool and a strong pool of candidates to consider. So it's not to make a judgment on who the right candidate is. And I think that's important. We aggressively recruit, we facilitate, we advise, we don't have a vote. So we are out there in all the markets from that perspective trying to identify candidates and trying to identify talent.
Lori, in our material, we've highlighted the scale. Has anyone expressed concern about trying to manage something this big?
There's questions about that. There's no question as you look at individuals that maybe are making a step up in their career, right? It could be a step up from a institutional size and scale and the volume from that perspective. It could be a step up at an institution of similar size, but it's a step up from a position that's not the president. So there's always those conversations about, where are they? What does my skill set look like from that perspective? And can I do this job? There's no question about that. I don't think we've talked to anybody who's been scared.
No feelings of constraint by anyone on the strategy is so well laid out that perhaps confining in terms of ability to make mid-course corrections, modifications, that nothing like that.
No, and I think that as people have looked at your strategy and looked at really where you want to go, I think they still see there's some room to do things, right? And so that it's not so defined that there's not an opportunity to be nimble and, quite frankly, to be responsive to the markets and to be responsive of what's happening in higher education as well as the world. So that's not been an issue. I think people are excited about what you've been able to accomplish and relatively over a very short period of time, quite frankly. This is a university that really has been able to be relatively nimble. I know you're all living in it every day, and you may not feel that every day, but on a grand scale, I think that nimbleness and the idea of being innovative, that innovative piece, we've talked about this a great deal, but the best candidates, they really want to be a part of something that's outstanding but wants to be better, right? They don't want to maintain, and I think that that's what people are saying about this opportunity and this university. All right, what's our timing? I don't have my phone right there. Okay, so let me just ask this question and get your thoughts. And we only have a few minutes, and again, I don't want to take away, and we will come back to this because this is an important topic from that perspective, just to kind of get your thoughts. The three questions that candidates ask us when we make that initial phone call, the first question is, what do they want? What are they really looking for? The second question they ask us is, what's the opportunity? So why? And some of the things that you just talked about is the why. And then the third question is, what are the challenges? So what do you see as the issues, not only for this person, but more importantly, what are the issues going forward for the university? And so from that context, I think that helps us identify who candidates are, if they have the scalability, if they have the depth to do the job. But it also allows them to say, are my strengths what they're looking for in a potential candidate? So I might turn that back to you as members of this committee, because those are going to be critical things that you're thinking about as you identify those you'd like to interview. What do you all, before you have this conversation today and multiple conversations today and tomorrow, what are you looking for in your next leader, and what do you see as those opportunities and challenges?
I would say definitely looking for someone who has a passion for people. I think when you think about there's 66,000 students here, plus everyone who's involved, probably comes out to about 100,000 people in the general area who have a concern for UCF. So I think just that genuine care for other people and wanting to work with other people, because at the end of the day, it is kind of a people business. It's not just numbers and metrics and all of that. That's just important. But at the end of the day, they have to, as a student, I want to be able to go into the office and have it be somebody who's really friendly and people-oriented.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hey, Beth.
Someone who understands strong societal impact and how a university can achieve that.
How do you think the university is doing today in that?
I think that we're doing very well. I think that it's primarily recognized locally. We certainly impact this community. I think we're starting to be able to impact the region. What I'd like to see us is have national and then global impact.
Thank you.
I know something important to me is going to be, very important to me, is going to be the candidate's ability to look out into the future, 10 or 15 years, and help lead the university into that future. I believe that we're going to see dramatic changes in the next 10 years. Maybe probably everything we do will be done different 10 years from today. And so the candidate's ability to look out, understand trends, technology, societal, global trends, and help lead us through that, because it's going to be a pretty dramatic change over the next 10, 15 years.
No question.
Human capital. We have a variety of people that work here, including faculty, staff, and others, and to understand their lives and livelihoods and be able to lead them in a way that's both internal as well as also all of the partnerships outside.
Thank you.
I'd like to see UCF students be the rock stars of the world, that we can just sit there and applaud students. I mean, UCF to me really is our students, and how well they do in their long-term careers is really based on what we can provide them now. And UCF is on a really good trajectory with high impact practices for students, getting them into internships and societal needs. And we have a long way to go to get all students so that they are really engaged and love UCF forever, and the world loves UCF because of them.
And to follow on that, someone who really understands how to get us into the deep research areas, because it's the research that attracts the faculty, that attracts the opportunities for the students, that attracts the better students, and it all flows down.
Lord, I'd like to see candidates who have dealt with resource challenges and how they have overcome those challenges and been innovative in helping to move the needle for the institutions that they represent.
What I'd like you to do before we go on to the listening sessions is give that some thought, and give thoughts to what you see as those opportunities and challenges, and we'll circle back to that. And I also would like to offer you the opportunity at any point to reach out to us and to make that phone call to us to say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity that I see or challenge that I see, so that we will have that information. And I think it'll be very helpful as we go through the process, and most importantly, to be helpful for candidates. And as we begin to and really escalate this process of recruiting candidates, we always have to remember at the end of the day that every candidate is excited about something different. And if the hook for every candidate was the same, it would make our life very, very easy. But the reality of it is we have to find the candidates and what's important to them, and then try to make that match and see if that match exists. So everything that you say, as little as you may think it is from an opportunity, it may be the one thing that this candidate's waiting to hear in order to pull the trigger to be in that search. And so I think that's an important part of this process. So you have open access to us from that perspective, and just, should call us and say, hey, let's set up a time to talk, but also give it some thought. And we'll continue to talk about this as we have continued updates from that perspective. And I think as you see the things that you're thinking about, what you're looking for in candidates, I think you'll see that today and tomorrow as you have these listening sessions, as well as from the feedback from the website as well. So I appreciate it. I think the bottom line is we're in a really good place right now. The search is progressing very, very well. And now we've got to continue to get out there to work to get the best candidates.
Laurie, I think you have full commitment from all of us to support personally any concerns raised over openness, diversity, or the Sunshine Law, or any concerns that would possibly get in the way of key candidates from becoming interested in pushing forward their candidacy. We stand ready to do everything we can to recruit their interest and break down barriers that they might be thinking about that really aren't barriers. So we can support you fully in what you're doing.
That's outstanding, and we'll use that.
I think we all have your contact information.
If not, just let us know.
Provide it back on the 5th. We'll redo it. Great.
Thank you.
Anyhow, thank you. What we do is all about students. What we're doing is all about students. It's about student outcomes. In that interest, on the way in this morning, I met John Prothrow, who's with us. He's a graduate student in accounting at UCF. Advised me he was just recently accepted at Harvard University's MBA program. So in addition to our renowned football prowess, we have a lot of other great things going on here, and just continuous great student outcomes and achievement. Very proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and maybe you'll even stay with UCF with that fine offer. Anyhow, so that's awesome. Great news. So before we conclude, any questions, comments on how we've progressed up to this point? As you know, we've got 4 listening sessions scheduled. One will begin in about 5 minutes. Is a key part of our process of gathering inputs. They'll be here, too, and around Orlando today and tomorrow. I'd like to express my deep appreciation to committee members who have agreed to support these meetings. The fair burden on your time, but I think very, very important to the process. Grant has reported the online survey is performing very well. We've recorded over 1,000 responses to the surveys. That'll close off tomorrow, and then we'll summarize the results and share them with the public next week in summary form. For those staying for the 2 p.m. listening session, we have a light lunch. Be ready at the conclusion of the upcoming listening session. Staff will guide you to the student union for that. For those watching online now, the sessions will be recorded, but not live streamed like this one. The recordings will be posted to the Presidential Search website when ready. So with that, I officially conclude our search committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just before we conclude, at some point in this process, I think it would be helpful to hear from the incumbent, Dr. Hitt. And, obviously he's done a great job for the last, almost 3 decades. I think for him to share with us as a committee what he sees as someone who's done it for the last 20-some years as the attributes of a good candidate, I think it'd be great to have him come to one of the meetings or in some way be able to provide us additional input along that.
Sounds like a terrific input, and we should take the action to invite President Hitt to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Great idea. So with that, if nothing else, we'll take a 5-minute adjournment before the commencement of our listening session. Thank you.
Good. How about you, all right?
Doing well.